Yo guys, how we getting on? Ben Ababi here and welcome back to the channel. So I guess I can only apologize for the hiatus again in content. There have been two pretty good reasons for that though. The first and foremost is obviously YouTube are making it really difficult on poker content creators. The other reason is because I've been doing a lot of traveling this month. I went on a really fun road trip with one of my best mates from the UK, from Melbourne all the way up to Sydney, stopping in different wine regions and small towns on the way, ending in Sydney for a long weekend. Super fun trip and I'm feeling super motivated and ready to grind. As you've seen in the thumbnail and the title, today's video is a very fun one for me to make. I have had my best month ever in my 15-year career, but we'll jump on into those results now before, of course, hopping into some spicy hands. So I know the graph doesn't look that spectacular, but let me explain why. So at the tables, we played over 40,000 hands this month of 1KNL and 2KNL. I'm actually very pleased with that. I aim for about 30,000 hands a month. At the tables, in green line, we made over $26,000 and in orange line, about $34,000. So you might be asking, where did the rest of the profit come from? And of course, it is the Ben Ababi channel and we are BBJ Lords. So most of it came from that. First and foremost, we got dealt into a table at 2KNL where a BBJ was hit. We were not involved in the hand, but we picked up $11,500 there. And then we were playing a 1KNL anti-table versus a recreational. And again, we were on the good side of the BBJ, losing the hand, but winning the lion's share of the BBJ for just under $60,000. Now, obviously there are rakeback and leaderboards as well. Because I played a lot of hands this month and I was playing like quite a lot of hours, in rakeback alone, we earned just over $7,500, and in leaderboards, somewhere in the same region as well, for a total of $15,000 and something dollars. All things accounted for, the total on the month was around $113,000. I think previous to that, my best ever month was somewhere in the region of 80, maybe 70. So needless to say, I am super pleased. So that's gonna do it for the results, but let's jump on into today's hands. We've got a huge range for you today. First up, we have got some pretty interesting theory hands versus regs. Then we've got some other, well, they are versus regs, but they're not quite theory, let's just say. And of course, we do have that BBJ hand history at the end of the video as well, so stick around for it. So first up today, we have got pocket kings in the small blind, and we get a min open from the reg in MP. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think this reg is the best, or one of the very best in the 1K and 2K GG pool. Also, the highest volume reg, I think, as well as the highest emote reg as well. I'm sure many people will know who this is when I say that. So we do pick up pocket kings, we make the mandatory 3-bet, my sizing is 9 big blinds, and in position does defend. We do see 10-8-5 with a flush draw. Going to be doing a little bit of checking and looking to check raise this hand without a heart, but mostly betting, and on this occasion I do bet. This was versus like button and it was like a 10-8-5 rainbow, and I'm going to range bet. I'm probably just going to go half pot. But versus MP, I just do want to be playing some checks with my range. So I'm going to size up, use my 2/3 pot sizing, and leverage my advantage at the top end, as well as appreciating that the board is very dynamic. Now, we see the ace of spades on the turn, which is a very interesting card because I think that there may be some people watching this video who just want to check because an ace has come, their kings doesn't really feel like a value bet anymore. However, when you actually break this down and when we 3-bet pre-flop and c-bet 2/3 on the flop, when we have hands, let's just say like queen, heart, ace, for example, in our range, or ace, jack of clubs, or something along those lines, in position is just not going to be defending those hands on the flop. Now that makes up a huge portion of the out of positions range, those ace-x regions that in position doesn't have anymore. Not only that, but when we do bet 2/3 pot on the flop and then in position is defending hands like 6-5 or 8-7 or combos that are now kind of downgraded, whereas out of position doesn't c-bet those anywhere near as much as in position calls. This is actually a very good card for us. For that reason, I decide to range bet. So after a bit of a tank, we do go with the 27% on the turn, and in position takes a little bit of time and does call. And on the river, we do see the second card on the flop pairing, which is the 8 of spades. I think there's very good merits here to using a block sizing again. Obviously, our sizing scheme is going to be all in and a small bet. It depends where you kind of want to draw the line with your small bet range. I think it's probably going to be somewhere in the region of kings. I think queens might even be too thin. Perhaps in position doesn't raise kings on the flop always. I would imagine they do it most of the time, or at least some of the time. So I maybe would have liked to see myself block here on the river, but I'm pretty okay with checking some of the time. Either way, I do check, and I'm now thinking about what I'm going to do versus a jam, which ultimately is what we face. So I guess my question to you guys is, what would you do here? Do you think that this is just a snap fold, that the people you play in your population don't bluff this spot enough? Ultimately, I quite like taking a theory approach in this spot, especially versus a good reg, and let me just talk about the theory very, very briefly. Do we beat value? No, so we are definitely bluff catching. Do we block value? Yes, we do, to the ace-king region ×2. And also, how do we interact with the bluffing region from imposition? Imposition cannot bluff either of our cards any percentage of the time. Therefore, we do have a pretty good bluff catcher naturally, but also, given the nature of the board, there are like 2 or 3 straight draws that have missed, and also a bunch of flush draws as well. If imposition has a hand like ace-jack, I still think that they probably will just jam that hand. In theory, in reality, who knows if that's going to happen. So because I block some value and I unblock all the bluffs, I do decide to call my hand always on the river, which I think, by the way, is pretty standard, but just would like to share my thoughts. So after a bit of time, we do call, and unfortunately on this occasion, we do run into pocket 8s. And next up, we have got pocket aces at 2KNL, and we open things up. We do get called by the cutoff, which is a kind of a more straightforward / standard reg, and we get defended out the big blind versus a pretty big recreational. Now, this recreational is a bit of a weird one because on some days they just like absolutely blow up, and then on other days they play a little bit nittier and a bit tighter. On this day, it was a little bit too early to deem what kind of mood they were in, so I didn't have like strong feelings either way. So that's kind of where I was at on this day. So we do see 7-6 deuce rainbow. I'm imagining imposition is going to be stabbing a lot on this board simply because they want to isolate the recreational. So I do go ahead and check to the cutoff. Now, you could make pretty good arguments for just calling here, and the reason for that is that imposition's range is going to have 7s and 6s a lot of the time. Our hand is pretty much never going to be worth all in over 3 streets versus the reg, so I don't mind it. However, given how dry the board is, and given I know the propensity of the recreational to blow up, I do decide to check raise it, and we see a 5 of hearts on the turn after the reg folds. I think this is a very bad card for us, simply because out of position is just going to have a million 2 pairs and straights now. You might argue you want to go really small on the turn and then kind of assess where from there. However, I don't really want to put myself in a spot where I'm getting check raised, which I think will happen on average a lot on this turn. And I don't see there being a huge amount of value in betting turn to then bet the river as well. My hand doesn't really need that much protection. Obviously, there's the very bad rivers, but I'm just going to be calling a reasonable sized bet on most rivers, if not every river, apart from maybe exactly an 8 or something like that. So I do go ahead and check it on back, and we river a pretty pleasing ace of spades. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. Obviously, we're just going to shove versus any bet, even if it's kind of like 1.5x pot or something like that. However, we don't really get that opportunity because the recreational almost immediately jams it in for 3 times the pot. I don't waste too much time before calling, but I just wonder whether or not anyone would fold here. I think it's kind of outrageous to consider folding here. As you can see, I didn't snap it, but I did call very quickly, simply because we should, I say should in inverted commas, we should just value catch here. We are, however, calling 3 times pot, and I think this is quite a rare line from a recreational. This recreational isn't one of those types just to jam a bluff here or to jam thin value or something like that. Either way, I do obviously call, and on this occasion we run into 9-8 of diamonds, which is none other than the nuts. So next up we come to the most interesting hand of today's video. It's a theory hand though, so just giving you some pre-warning on that. This is the most interesting hand I've played in a long time, I think. Now, we get dealt king 8 of hearts in the big blind. We get open from the orange tag. Now, my understanding of this specific player is that they are an MDA reg, and let me tell you now, they are a very good MDA reg at that. They're very tough to play, and if we're going to get into an exploit war, I think I'm going to lose on that front. King 8 of hearts is going to be a 3-bet some of the time, and I go ahead and do it on this occasion. We see a very displeasing Jack 7-5 with a flush draw, and we have an option. So similar to the 10-8-5 in the first hand, where I was going 2/3 pot with some checks, versus the button, I am also playing 2/3 pot and some checks on this specific texture. Now, a general rule of thumb is on these boards where you're signing up, the hands where you have double suits that have no backdoor flush draws or flush draws are basically the first hands to get checked. So like the ace 3 of hearts of the world, the ace 9 of hearts, the king 8 of hearts, you get the idea. We do see the 7 of clubs on the turn, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So on the flop, we are going to have mixed some checks with combos like king jack, 8-7, pocket kings. Obviously, we're going to have a bunch of combos. In terms of in-position stabbing range, I think they are going to be stabbing some hands that are 7x, combos like 7-6 and 8-7, etc. But they're also going to be checking back some hands like king jack too. And then the last thing to mention is that unlike us as out of position, where we don't get to bet many or any heart and club varieties, in position does get to stab some of those. So we're talking king 10 of hearts, king queen of hearts, those type of hands. Even though they do block the folding range and it's kind of unintuitive, that is generally what happens in theory. So when we see the 7 of clubs on the turn, we have a lot going for us. We block king jack, which we would take this line with. We also, very importantly, block 8-7 of hearts, which we often check, as well as in position often checking back, and now arriving in this node with trips. The last thing to mention, and you might argue that a negative for our hand, is that we block pocket 8s. And whilst I wouldn't disagree with you on that, I don't think this player, and I don't think theory, is going to fold 8s all that much, given that they pretty much most of the time are going to be blocking 8-7 as well, which is obviously a value hand for out of position. The one thing I don't like about what I did in this hand is going 2/3 pot. The reason I don't like going 2/3 pot is because what am I saying that I'm betting here? What is the worst hand I'm going to bet the turn with? It's got to be a jack, and a strong jack at that. Probably a queen jack or even a king jack. So with that range, it's not like I need to go with the 2/3 pot sizing, because it doesn't add any new combos to my range that want to merge. So I may as well go with the big sizing, which for me should have been pot. We now arrive at the 3 of clubs, and again, I decide to pure bluff my combo. And the reason for that is because we still block king jack and 8-7, which is very, very huge. Blocking pocket 8s now probably isn't ideal, because that is a large portion of our bluffing range. A hand like 9-8 of hearts or something like that if we hadn't bet the flop. But you can't have everything in this life. I'm a little bit concerned because I know this player is quite sticky, but I still think that this is just like a really, really good and solid find, and one that I'm not really willing to not find, because those are the scenarios where we end up getting super run over versus these player types. And in my mind, I know I'm going to shove king jack on the river here, so I do have a plethora of value. On this occasion, we get supremely owned by ace king. I'm assuming that they just feel that we bluff neither of their cards, which is probably true, to be honest, as well as blocking the very best ace-7 as well as ace-jack combos, so I can't fault them at all. So penultimately, we have got king-queen offsuit about 130 big blinds deep. We get an open from the MP player, and I defend the big blind. We do flop top 2 on king-queen deuce, and we face a small bet. Now, I'm going to raise my hand most of the time, but not always, and on this occasion, I do raise. Reads on this reg, the light blue tag is not a good tag for this player to have. I have since changed it. This player is extremely sticky, doesn't like to fold, is very happy to put their stack in. Weak is just like not the right word for this player, which is the light blue tag. So they do go ahead and call, and we see a 10 of hearts. So in theory, I think this is probably going to be around a B70 spot. I think there's a fair symmetry in the nuts here. Maybe in position has slightly more nuts, because I'm going to check call my ace jack. What I do know is that this player is very, very aggressive and very willing to put it in. And that isn't just via when we check and they start barreling off, but also when we start betting and we get raised. Another thing to note is that we are a bit deeper as well. So I do think that king queen is going to be a mix anyway. I can't tell you whether or not it's going to mostly bet or mostly check, but it's going to be somewhere in the middle, I would imagine. On this occasion, I do decide to check it on over to in position, and they don't waste much time in checking it back. We do see a deuce of diamonds on the river. Now, I think checking would be okay. We do double block the calls from the king X and queen X region, so you could argue that we want to check and then allow in position to bluff a bunch of other combos. That said, I just also think that king queen is going to have to value bet some of the time on the river. I do not feel good checking king queen all the time on the river just because we double block calls. So this is a situation where I'm going to mix in some bets and some checks. On this occasion, I do decide to bet, and I go with the pot sizing on the river. Now, villain doesn't waste all that much time before shoving it in for another 105 big blinds. So I'm just going to say what I thought in game, and the first thing I thought in game was, what the hell is in position repping here? I sense that it's unintuitive for this player type to check any very good hands on the turn. We're talking pocket kings, queens, twos, and ace jack. They may check pocket tens, but I think that they would just fold that on the flop. Pure blocks our bluffs and has just got terrible, terrible visibility. So tens is kind of a combo that I thought could be in there some of the time. But where is the rest of the value coming from? When we're this deep as well, I think it's very, very human nature to want to build the pot. Sounds super whaley, but it's just a very, very true kind of human orientation. You want to put in lots of money when you have very good hands on a dynamic board when there is a lot of money behind. So when I have a king and a queen, and I just cannot ever see in position checking ace jack, I don't really know what we lose to. There is the smallest argument here that we lose to a hand like ace deuce of hearts. But honestly, when we lose to one combo in the range, and I actually think it may be one combo only, I don't really see how we can possibly be losing this hand, and I could just be completely wrong on that. Regardless of that, I didn't really believe the spot. The story doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me, and I do decide to just flick it in with my blockers. And on this occasion, we have run into the jack ten of spades. And honestly, I'm just really not a fan of their line. I think this, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're watching this video, or anyone who's watching this video, this feels like a bit of a forced play. You know, when you've kind of like got money invested, you see a bet and you think you've got some blockers and you're like, I'm just going to like try and push this over the line without really thinking about the way in which the hand has been played. But perhaps there were some exploit reasons, and actually it is a completely fine play. You guys can let me know. And that brings us to our final hand of the day, which is the BBJ hand history. So we get an open from an insanely passive recreational at the 5-10 with a $5 ante-table. But I got ace 10 of hearts, so I do go ahead and 3-bet it up. We then instantly get a 1/3 pot lead from the recreational. I'm already not liking this. This recreational does not bet unless they have a hand that they like, but we got second pair. What we're going to do is 1/3 pot. We turn the ace of clubs, and as always, I'm already thinking of Vegas and the Mirage because I know that these are the type of boards where BBJs happen, and when this recreational bets, honestly, it could just be king queen, there is a very good chance that they have ace jack, so we have a little bit of a sweat. They then go ahead and bet half pot. Already, by the way, in a lot of spots with versus a recreational, this is like the dream spot. I'm telling you, versus this recreational, this is the anti-dream spot. So I just call and pray for the ace on the river. We do call, and we do see the ace of diamonds on the river, giving us aces full of tens. And I am just on my knees praying to the poker gods one time, or should I say fourth time, we're going to hit another BBJ. Obviously, give it a little bit of a tank, give one more prayer, shove it in for the min raise. Villain snap calls, and on this occasion, we have managed to bang off the BBJ once more for $59,544. Super crazy. I feel very fortunate. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know what you thought about the hands, about the BBJ, about the theory punts and that kind of thing as well. But until next time, take care, and I will see you at the tables.